Hello and welcome to another episode of Business Velocity. Today we are talking all about sales. Today we are talking to Doug C. Brown. Doug is the CEO of CEO Sales Strategies and a renowned sales, revenue, and profit growth expert. Doug, over his career, has founded or built more than 35 businesses and collectively generated over $960 million in sales for himself and his clients. Doug is the creator of a predictable, reliable, and measurable math-based model for sales revenue growth, which is what we're going to review today. He has helped businesses achieve remarkable outcomes, including raising close rates by 143%. His latest venture, Vibitno, is a revolutionary sales automation software designed to increase sales revenue by enhancing follow-up efficiency, boosting client retention, and increasing sales productivity. Doug is a wealth of knowledge and experience, and I am so excited for you to hear what he has to say today. How are you doing, Dave?
I am doing well, Hannah. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it was for our listeners, it was just Labor Day weekend, so we just had a 3-day weekend, which was lovely. And it is now the fall, which is my favorite time of year.
Yeah.
It kicked off with a couple new clients this month, so yeah, things are going pretty well.
Yeah, I always enjoy a long weekend and especially fall weather. It's always good to get back. I love sitting outside as the air gets just like a little bit cooler, a little bit crisper. As
Yeah.
a upper Midwest kid, the cold fall was always one of my favorite seasons. And you mentioned new clients. We've been in kind of a sales boon recently. We've had a lot of good things going on over here at Evolve, and today we are talking to Doug Brown, and Doug has a really great system for businesses to want to grow their revenue, who want to grow their sales. He's going to teach us about that system today. I will both be a podcast host, but also a deep listener today. In terms of what he's got in store for us, sounds like it's a system that works really well for a lot of the folks he works with. So we're excited to talk to Doug today.
Yeah, absolutely. This being so, I always say, I am not necessarily a salesperson, so I'm so curious to learn more about this because it sounds like it's brought a lot of success to his clients. So bring him in.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if there's a client we've talked to in the last 10 years that hasn't said some variation of, man, if we could just get more sales.
Totally.
Right? Like revenue solves all problems is a thing that we hear on occasion.
Yeah.
And this is really a relevant topic for everybody. So we hope you get a lot out of it. And let's bring Doug in and let's learn the system.
Hello, Doug.
Hello.
Hey Doug.
How are
How you
you
doing?
doing?
Good. Welcome to the pod. Thanks for jumping in. We were just talking in the intro here about over the last decade, as we've been doing, the work that we do in the world, consulting, building businesses. I don't know if there's a client that we've worked with, of the hundreds of clients we've worked with in the last decade, that hasn't said some variation of, man, if we could just grow sales. So it's timely that you're here, and I would imagine it's always timely to be hearing from a guy that can help, has a system for growing revenue. How did you get into this game, Doug? What led you to where you are?
I actually got into it by accident. It was very strange because, I started working at the age of 3 for my dad. And I swept floors for 25 cents a week, loved it. They used to bring me to the bars in the afternoon for lunch. And I'd get my Coca-Cola. They propped me up on the bar. I was having a great time. I heard my mother didn't care for that part. But all my brothers went through that. And we worked pretty much in his business until we were 18. Always had side businesses on the side as well. Went into the military, came out of the military. We were always taught you have to get an education. So we went to college. Somewhere in college, I was still running different businesses and got a few degrees. And one of the businesses that I was running was a telecommunications consulting and auditing company. And it led me to coach a company in the telecom space on how to reduce their phone bills called Coach University. They said to me, "You should be a coach." And I said, "I used to play some semi-professional soccer." And they said, "No, no, no, no. That's not the coach. This is the coach." I'm like, "People pay for that?" Like, I had no idea whatsoever.
Sure.
So I started looking at it and I'm like, this sounds like great. And I realized I was coaching people all along anyways. People asking me advice on how to grow their companies and things like that. And then I ended up helping some gentleman. His name was Conrad Levinson. He wrote a book series called Guerrilla Marketing. And I helped them. And he introduced me to a guy named Chet Holmes. And so he said, you should talk to Chet. And I talked to Chet and I'm like, hey, do you want me to coach for your company? And he said, sure, we'll give you a shot. And in my first 4 months, I became the number one the highest grossing coach he ever had. I was in my first 4 months, on my fourth month, I was selling $65,000 a month in coaching. And they were trying to figure out what the heck is this kid doing? And so it sort of kind of took off from there. Eventually, I became the president of sales and training for that company. And then a guy named Tony Robbins wanted to buy into the company. He bought into the company. For 7 years, I was Tony and Chet's president of sales and training. Had numerous record-breaking things that happened there. I took Tony's presenters close rate, not Tony personally, but the presenters team, from 17.8% to 43.2% in 4 months. I grew one product set by 4,153%, if I remember correctly. I doubled the front end sales team close rate. I took his average sale on his coaching from it was 6 months at $1,500, so $9,000 to $30,000 on the average client. So I did a lot of great things there. And what I didn't realize, honestly, was when you do this for Tony Robbins, other people actually pay attention. And
Yep.
so that's kind of how it started. And then after that, I helped a gentleman named Russ Whitney, super brilliant guy. And Russ owned a company called Rich Dad Poor Dad and $1 billion worth of brands. And so, we had great results there. And so it just kind of organically grew out there. I was always the guy behind the scenes tweaking and growing sales. Then eventually somebody said to me, hey, you probably should become a known quantity. And I'm like, I don't really care about that. And they said, no, you'll sell more. It's what you're teaching your clients, remember? And I'm like, good point. So I did start to do that. And, it just grew like that. And then, I was invited to speak different places and do things like that. And I know that sounds kind of like, well, that's not really a great business path, so to speak, but that's how this business actually grew. It was really more me just getting up every day, focusing on what I teach people to do, and then doing that with or for clients, including I was building lots of back end like sales teams and commission the sales teams. And I would do that a lot in the training industry for, I did that obviously for Chet and Tony and other people. The most recent one I did it for that was probably somewhat notable is the Ask Method company with Ryan Levesque and others. We started, I think we were doing 2.5 million when I started, and we were over 20 million when we ended. So, that's it's a model and a methodology that I started way back in my dad's business, and I just carried it through my life, and it works. So that's how it all came about.
Yeah. So the doer who became an accidental teacher, as opposed to the teacher who's trying to figure out how to do something,
Yes.
generally is a good path. Generally, a good path to go. Obviously, you've done the results. Any lessons you learned sweeping for a couple cents a day that have made their way into the methodology?
Yeah, actually, it's not glamorous work, right? I mean, he had an industrial machinery repair company. It was a dirty place. So
Yeah.
I looked like probably a chimney sweeping kid, by the time I got done every single day. But I did learn value of showing up, putting your energy and efforts into something and doing the best at it you can do. And always looking at it and saying, okay, how do I create leverage in this process? If I'm the only one doing this, how do I either get other people to do this, automate the process somehow? Instead of it taking me 3 or 4 hours to do this section, how can I get it done in 2 hours? Like even back then, I was always kind of thinking like, Robert Kiyosaki, I think, calls it good lazy, right? And the Rich Dad Poor Dad book.
Yeah.
So myself and Dave, we focus on business development with our clients, and I focus on a lot of the process development of the vision, like how we take the vision and then we implement it into the company. And
Yep.
my background is so not in sales, but it is something that I would like to understand better so that I can help operations, those two sides of the house, like they must be in sync, right? So
Yeah.
I think my first question, I would love to hear you review the 2X methodology and explain to us, kind of how it works, how it feeds into itself. And for our listeners, we're going to have the visual up on our YouTube channel. So if you're listening to this on Spotify or on Apple Podcast, hop over into YouTube and check out the visual. But I'd love to hear you explain, what is the cycle? How does this thing feed into itself? And then I would love to hear how you've operationalized it, because it is a method, it is a theory, but I would love to know kind of how does it brass tacks be brought into a company in
Sure.
particular. That's where my brain
Sure.
goes, is like, tell me what it looks like.
Give me the stuff.
Yeah.
So the first step out of the whole process is we've got to create, a baseline, right? Because a lot of people don't understand their baseline. So we collect the metrics right out of the gate. What are the conversion rates? What are the costs that they're spending out? What is their refund rate? What is their churn rate? What is the inflation rate that's going to affect their business? Because inflation rates affect different businesses in different capacities. It's not just like, hey, we got a 10% inflation rate going across the board in the United States or worldwide. Certain industries might be getting hit less or more than that, right? So what does all of the data say today? Because the data tells us a story. Here's where we are. Once we understand where that is, the next step is, what is the truthful goal that we actually want? I don't mean what is the goal. I mean, what is the truthful goal? There is a difference between the two. One usually is an honest goal. It's subjective. Oh, I'd like to double my company, or I'd like to grow by 3 million, or whatever the number is. And then when we're building the plan, the truthful goal always comes out anyways, because it's like, oh, wow, we've got to invest this to get that, or we've got to do this much work here, or I've got to restructure this to, yeah, this is what's stuck, right? That type of thing. So I like to come out with a truthful goal that's it's one that is high enough so people pay attention, and it's also easy enough to hit, knowing that we're probably going to blow it out of the water anyways. And so once we get that truthful goal, then one of the first things that I look at after we have the metrics, because the metrics usually tell this story anyways,
Hmm.
most of the companies don't understand how to translate what they do into the story of what they need to do. In other words, on how to convey the value proposition to their clients that the clients actually want.
Yeah.
Right? So we go in and we do what we call the ideal right fit buyer. And we figure out who is that ideal right fit buyer? What are they absolutely looking for? What's nice to have for them? What's a need to have for them? What's their wants, their needs, their fears? And I'm not talking about creating just a buyer persona. I'm talking about who buys quickest, who buys the fastest, if you will, who do you love to work with, who pays you the most, who easily buys, right? All of these factors, people don't look at that. And when you look at it, any running company, traditionally there's a sector of that market that's actually spending way more and a lot easier to work with than the majority of the clients. Not always, but in many cases. So operationally, how does this work out? I'll give you this as we go along, Hannah.
Great.
When I ran Chet Holmes' organization, they were generating Chet and Tony Robbins. They were generating between 1,000 and 3,000 leads a week. Now they're spending $13 a lead on average to generate this. And I was looking at the ideal right fit buyer, and I started looking at, they would come through radio ads to the sales team, schedule them for a 2.5 hour training. So I started looking at all the data, all the numbers in the training, who was buying the most, the quickest, who were the clients who moved on to the next stages, who were spending $35,000 to $250,000 with us. And I started segmenting all of this traffic. And then what I did is I altered the presentation to match the buyers. This is how our close rate went from 17.8% to 43.2% month one. Within 4 months, it stayed level. And for 7 years after that, it never came down.
Nice.
Okay. So I also recognized in their audience that they were generating 70% of their leads were being generated for companies who were 300,000 in revenue and down.
Mm.
But at that one time, they were trying to offer a one fit all product. So they had this thing called the Sales Mastery System, which was a great program. And they were selling 8 of those a month. And I was like, why aren't these companies buying this? So this is where you look at the metrics and you look at the data and you go in and it starts to tell you a story. And then your job as the part of the 2X job is to look at this data and talk to people and figure out why, what's the story behind the story. And what I found out was any company under $300,000, all they wanted to do is increase sales. They're in survival mode. I got to sell more. I got to sell more, sell more. Actually, under $1 million, they only want to increase sales. That was their number one thing. And so we had a sales mastery system. Why weren't they buying it? Because they wanted some coaching in it, and they had no coaching.
Mm.
So what I did is I took that product set. Now we were selling 8 of those a month at $895. I took that same set, didn't change it at all, added 6 weeks of group coaching, raised the price to $1,450. And we went from selling 8 of those a month at, let's call it $900, $7,200 a month, approximately just shy of $100,000 a year, to selling almost $8 million worth of that product in its first year.
Nice.
And I'm giving these numbers and expressing the operational, process that you're asking, how it works, so that people go, whoa, okay, maybe this works, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So once you identify who the right fit buyer is in the messaging that applies, you're going to align all of this to that strategy of that which you want to sell, which the buyer deems as value.
Yes.
It's super important people understand that concept, because if the buyer doesn't deem it as value, it's like, and men, we can relate to this. You go up, you see a pretty girl and you're like, hey, I want to ask you out, and da, 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 and she goes, drop dead, right? But my line was so good, like didn't work, right? Because that's not value to her.
Yeah.
Or she
Yeah.
might not be the right fit buyer at that moment. Maybe she just got engaged and she, hoping she's going to get engaged or whatever. So how does this messaging apply? And then how does it all fit into the metrics model? Well, the metrics model is not just data collection for the sake of data collection. You're collecting this data on a regular daily basis or weekly basis, and you're looking at the numbers and how everything is affecting it. So let me give you a couple examples.
Yeah.
If I have a sales team, whether we have inbound leads or outbound leads, I want them reaching out to our clients, our potential buyers. So daily, how many outreaches are going on per individual? Once I understand that number, I want to now know what's the connection rate.
Mm-hmm.
Did they connect? Because you can reach out, and if you're reaching out, it's AT&T, used to say, reach out to someone, right? That old commercial. But if you're hearing on the end of the phone, which we don't usually hear anymore, that's a busy signal, right? So there's no connection. So how many connections are we getting? And then from the connection, what are the response rates from that connection? Are they positive, neutral, or negative? Now, if we just take that little sector there, we reach out, we get someone, we made 100 outbound attempts, we got 10 connections. Some people would be happy if that fit into the ideal truthful goal.
Yeah.
I would not personally. I want to go better than that. So what does that tell me? Maybe we're calling at the wrong time. Maybe we need to send a message ahead of time saying, hey, I'm going to be calling you. Right? We got to test all of these things to optimize that process. If I can get that process from 10% to 15%, I've got an increase right then and there. What did I spend for money to do that? Probably nothing. So that drops right to the bottom line of the process. Now, let's just say I got, for number easy, I got my 10% connection rate. We're really happy with that. We wanted 7%, but we're at 10%. And now out of that 10%, I look and I see that 50% of the people are responding positively, 50% of the people are responding negatively, nobody's responding neutral.
Mm.
That tells me either if I'm calling on the ideal right fit buyer, my messaging can be improved.
Mm-hmm.
I can get that 50%. And by the way, it's never zero on the neutral, but I can get that 50%. Maybe I can get that to 70%. Because the next metric is from the positive response rates or all the response rates, what's our appointment ratio? And so from the appointment ratio, what's our, let's make it this easy. What's our close rate?
Mm-hmm.
I can start to look at all of these metrics in between and all the sub metrics. How many presentations were done? What was this done? What was the response from the presentation? What was this? And all of these little optimization points along the path, they add up. 1% here, 0.5% there, 3% there. It's compounding interest that stacks on one another.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how you get geometric growth. Not to steal this from Jay Abraham, but that's what he came out with originally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to keep refining the campaigns, strengthening the offers. Wow, improving the follow-up. Why would we do that? Because follow-up is an easy lift, 5 to 20% increase in revenue when you do this right. So what we're doing through this whole process is we're creating new ways to go out. So we get the ideal right fit buyer. We're measuring everything. We're aligning everything that we're supposed to be on the messaging. Now we're going to become a master prospector.
Mm-hmm.
That means we are going to create 6 new ways to go outbound. And we're going to keep measuring those ways. And we're going to get 6 high-performing activities that are going to work within 12 months. And then we're going to automate those as much as possible. When we're automating this process, we're now creating leverage. Remember when I was saying I was sweeping the floor? How do I do it in an hour versus 3 hours?
Sure.
We're creating leverage, leverage, leverage. If we think about how to grow revenue, it's really lead flow plus workflow equals cash flow. Workflow is everything you do in the sales process. So the more leads we can bring in, the more that we can work on the workflow, converting sales. Then we add another piece to that was how do we increase the transactional value, the buying frequency, and how do we increase the new customers coming out of that, i.e. referrals. This all becomes a system, and we're refining these campaigns over and over and over.
Yeah.
We're improving our skill sets on how do we do the workflow better, more effectively, more efficiently. So then when you keep moving through, you're now measuring all these results in the revenue growth close rates that you're looking for. What's the retention? What's the productivity? All of these things get measured, and what impact does that achieve in the process?
I mean, I think the thing that I'm like sitting here with is just how you are aligning like data and metrics with a person's experience, and like keeping it both analytical and also personable is like such a good combination. I mean, I know that with operations, like you can try and make an operational workflow efficient, but if a person isn't actually going to do it or manage it or maintain it, there's no like personal element to it, then like it breaks down. It can't just be, a fully numbers game, and it can't also just be about the people because then everything's customized and gets messy. So I really like this unification unification of both the story and the metrics. We talk a lot about story as well. So like our process is the 5 facets of business. One of those facets is the story. Is your story aligned to what your customer is going to experience? And I like bringing that into this sales flow that you've outlined as well. So yeah, I think in a funny way, as much as I was maybe like intimidated about the conversation around sales, I was like, oh no, this is all kind of like makes a lot of sense.
Look, selling is this. One or more people, and I say one because sometimes we have to sell ourselves, right? Has a problem or wants to gain a goal, or maybe get an opportunity that just popped up. Like, not really hungry, but wow, this thing, food just went on sale. It's half price off. I love that type of food. It's an opportunity. It's kind of a quick sale, but it's usually a problem or a goal. And we're having this dialogue trying to figure out the problem or how to gain our goal. And now if we're talking to someone else and they're helping us to gain that goal or to solve that problem, and they ask for some remuneration in that process, and we agree, that's a sale. That it doesn't have to be monetary gain. There's some exchange of value that we do all the time naturally as human beings. And if you all don't believe me, just watch children. They are the best salespeople on the planet.
Hmm. For sure.
The challenge happens when we start to become adults and we start to go, oh, if I say this or I do this and I'm embarrassed or I feel this way or this person rejects me or this, we carry all our childhood wounds into our careers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Hannah, to your point on the people, this is why part of the process that is in the 2X method is we actually work on the mind shaping process of getting rid of all of that stuff that's holding on to people. And we work on that not because we like to just work on people's minds, but we know that if somebody believes that they're a 7 and they want to go to a 9, and we start to go to the 9 and we get to 8.2 and they believe they're a 7, they actually do things to bring themselves back to being a 7.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
And or vice versa. If they think they're a 9 and they're a 7, they're highly motivated and will do things, sometimes not in the correct capacity to actually prove that they're a 9.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to work on those triggers because I have worked with businesses in the past or even solo entrepreneurs in the past where, I had one gentleman, he went from $140,000 a year in commissions to $2.1 million a year in his first year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he started sabotaging that at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it was affecting his whole life. Right. And so we had to work on those triggers so that he was able to understand that his monetary success doesn't define him as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we got past, because his marriage was starting to get into trouble because he was like, being like, hey, I'm making all the money and that type of thing. I'm like, dude. So we worked on all of that. And once we started working on all of that as we were going through that process, because he wanted to go from 2.1 to 3 million. And, once we started working on that, his marriage started to heal. He was getting better quality clients, even though he was doing 2.1 million. He was now able to get to higher level people because he was able to speak because he wasn't ending the truth like he was with other people, right? That type of thing. So it's a very important component that you brought up around the people. And if we don't have accountability to that process of measurement and the metrics and growing the people internally, then the system will actually break down.
Yeah, we talk a lot about. I'm really glad you're raising this point. I think a lot of folks are looking for, yeah, but like, give me the tool. Like, what's the hammer? What's the screwdriver? What's the thing I need to accomplish the thing that I have? And they forget that there's somebody holding the hammer and somebody holding the screwdriver. And how we use that tool and who we are when we show up at work really makes a difference. We talk a lot about the marriage between systems and behavior. If you can't align those two things, you can have the best system in the world. You could adopt I could download the 2X theory and I could do all that. But if I'm a 4 and I'm wishing to be a 10, I'm probably not going to be able to make the system work in the way that it can work because I'm not lined up with it. And vice versa. If I'm a 10 but I don't have the tools, then I'm not performing in the way that I want to be performing.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right, Dave, because our limbic system will kick in and our limbic
Yeah.
system is just to protect us, right? It's survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we feel and we have a strong belief like that, and we're emphatically sure of that,
Yeah.
well, our limbic system is actually still in charge. So our prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part and the creative side of our brain, the limbic system, I think it takes about 0.2 of a second to kick in. The prefrontal cortex takes about 1 to 2 seconds. But when the limbic system kicks in, it's now kicking in stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, everything. And so it overrides the ability for the other system to kick in.
Yeah.
So the other system just justifies it.
Right.
Exactly. It creates a reason for why that happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So now we believe it even more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, I want to come back to one thing you said, in part because we run into I'll call it cowboy sales teams on a regular basis, which is
Yep.
they have some degree of success. Like I've got a $17 million company, I got a $7 million company right now that we're working with.
Yep.
And if I ask them the question like, hey, what's your sales process? And show me the data, they would say, Well, we just kind of do whatever shows up and we just kind of solve it. And I don't really know what our conversion rate is. I don't really know what this is. I don't even know where I would get that data.
Right.
Right. And at the same time, they're a $7 million, $17 million company. They're clearly doing something that's working decently well because they've been able to grow their business to a certain point of, a certain scale that a lot of folks would want to be at. So you've talked about like the importance of the metrics. Like we kind of start with metrics. We got to know what the metrics are, and that's where we do that kind of compounding interest. If we can fix this one by 2% and this one by 3% and this one by 10%, we're 15% better than we were before, or even exponentially, right? Where do you begin if a team just doesn't even know? They don't know what the process is, know what the data is. They've had some success, but it's almost always on the charisma of the person selling, or
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
one person who's good at it.
Yeah. So we got to go back to what's the truthful goal that they want.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when somebody says, I'm married and the marriage is not really fulfilling, but they're in the marriage and they go, well, this is as good as I'm going to get it. Right. That type of thing. And they live with it. Right. So some people just live like when you're saying what you're saying to me inside, I'm going, oh no, right? Because
Exactly.
bleed, 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 like there's bleed probably everywhere going on.
Yeah.
And but some people are okay with that. No matter what you do at that point, that's the way it's going to be. I just refuse to work with somebody. He's doing $42 million a year. He wants to get to 50 million. And I made an agreement with him. And he said he was going to get back to me on the agreement. And he failed to get that date. And I went, okay. So I reminded him and he said, oh, yeah, sorry. And he got back to me again, but this time. And after I reached out, and his response was, hey, sorry, I've been head down. We just hired a new sales guy. He's got a lot of experience. And I want to fill him in because I want to make sure we all play nice together. Now, this is a CEO of a $42 million company saying this. And I responded to him saying, I only work with the CEO. If you want your sales team to run your company, that's okay with me. But you're putting yourself in a very dangerous place because if they all up and leave overnight, you're going to fall from a $42 million company down to whatever, probably half very quickly. And so he didn't appreciate that. Right. But here's the thing. I got to tell him the truth. What's the truthful goal? He doesn't want to get to 50 million. It's just, he wants to get there conveniently. He wants to get there that way. Now, he's been struggling to get there for 4 years. So it's like, hello, So if they truthfully want to fix those issues, to answer your question, Dave, the first place we start is we look at the metrics. And a lot of times they don't want you to look at the metrics because that's going to reveal the truth.
Mm.
And so I'll give you an example back in Chet Holmes' days. For those of you who don't know, Chet Holmes has passed, and I'm sad about it. He passed a while back. So he can't come and call me up and yell at me on this one. So that's why I'm using it. He never liked me expressing this story, but it's true. So when I first took over as president of training and sales and training, excuse me, I started looking at the metrics on the front end of the sales team, and I was like, something's off. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And so I dug through 2 years worth of metrics, and here's the two epiphanies that I came to. Number one, we had 17,000 leads never followed up on. No, I'm sorry. We had 170,000 leads never followed up on over 2 years. That's crazy.
That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's easy to lose it when you're generating, 150,000 leads a year, out of the 300,000, half of them basically didn't get followed up on.
Yeah.
Number two, why didn't they get followed up on? Because the sales manager who was managing that process was deeming this many leads unqualified, so they never sent them to the sales team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you run the numbers at 170,000 leads at $13 a piece, that's quite a bit of change, Yeah. And the sales manager didn't want me coming in doing the deep dive on that process.
Yeah.
Rightfully so, right? So they kept reporting they had a 22% close rate, but in fact, they had a 12.1% close rate. Yep. Because the top line numbers were good, margins were thin. Chet was complaining we're losing 27% or 24% on certain divisions. I found the money for him right there. So that was an awakening for everybody.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons that people won't do that. But if they're open to doing that, Dave, the first place you start is the metrics. And then you get a good baseline of what's happening. It's what a doctor would do. I mean, how many of us would want to go into a doctor's office and say, geez, doc, I have a little pain here in my abdomen. And the doctor goes, you know what? I just had an opening at 11 a.m. We can do surgery right now. Come on in. Let's get on the table. We'll get you prepped up, et cetera. And we'd all go, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. No, thank
right?
you.
Yes, exactly.
But we don't want, you know what I mean? But you'd want the doctor to do a diagnostic. Maybe I need an MRI. Maybe I need an ultrasound, whatever. Let's figure out what's going on. Maybe I just have indigestion. I don't know what we have, right?
Yeah.
And so we do the same process on the business.
Yeah. As we should. It is our due diligence for sure. Well, Doug, I feel like we've been a part of a masterclass today. So thank you so much for all of the information. And your recall of numbers and percentages is very impressive to me as someone who's not a math person. But yeah, no, thank you so much for walking us through this process. We will have the visual of the process available in the show notes on YouTube. Come check it out over there if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But Doug, just real quick at the end here, how can people reach out to you and work with you or stay in touch with your work?
Yeah, if they'd like to know more about me, just personally or whatever, my LinkedIn profile is usually the place people go. It's Doug Brown 123. Doug at CEO Sales Strategies. So both of those are plural, salesandstrategies.com is my email address. My phone number, 832-549-4836. Please no spam text. I would appreciate that. And if you're just like, hey, I just want to kind of hang out with you every week, we do a newsletter. It's called the CEO Sales Strategy. Well, it's ceosalesstrategies.com/newsletter. Not very hard to do that. And, if they want to, if you guys are okay with it, they can get a free version of the 2X methodology if they want to, kind of an overview of the process.
Yeah.
Just reach out to me by email, and I'll have one of my team members send it out to them.
That's awesome. Yeah, we will definitely make sure that that's available to everyone, and we'll link your social profiles and your LinkedIn in the show notes as well. Doug, thank you so much for your time today, and we really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to connect again soon.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. I'm very grateful.
Doug. Appreciate it.
Well, sales team member, what'd you think of that conversation about sales?
Honestly, I think the really important message in this was truthful. He kept saying the word truthful goal, truthful this, truthful that. And I do think there's a lot of honesty and rigor that takes place in organizations that are willing and able to grow and willing and able to scale. You and I had a meeting today where we're pushing on the walls and the barriers and those resistances that show up, and every human has them. It's not a judgment, right? We all have a resistance to doing something. The biggest indicator, and I think Doug did a really kind of masterful job at poking at it and pointing at it, is to say, if you're unwilling to recognize that wall, or you're unwilling to deal with that wall and be really truthful about where you want to go, and then look at the numbers and look at them truthfully, not justifying, oh, well, no, we've got this close rate, I'm going to ignore this data over here. Right? If you really do those things and you're really truthful and honest and rigorous about what you do, the opportunities are endless to do better work and continue to excel and grow. So I appreciate his truth telling and truth seeking, because I do really think it's powerful, and at the same time kind of holding space for the human to be human.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Business Velocity, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on Business Velocity. Today's insights are just the beginning of enhancing your business's momentum. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also explore our framework at theevolveddifference.com. And remember, the time is now to take these strategies and apply your learning and achieve velocity. See you next time.